Welcome to the Masters in Telecommunications program at the University of Maryland at College Park.
Hello, my name is Mike Dellomo. I'm the Associate Director and Advisor for the Masters in Telecommunications program at the University of Maryland. This is the first of a series of advising talks I'd like to give, addressing common questions that new master's students have come to me with over the years. And one of the most common questions and the topic of this first course, this first talk, is, what courses should I take? All right. And it's actually one of the most common questions that graduate students have. New master's students will usually come to me with this. I want to work in telecom. What courses should I take? And the answer is not as obvious as it might seem. Telecom, that's partly for two reasons. Number one, the answer depends to a certain extent on what you see as your central area of focus. But it also relies on basic principles of what governs the telecom industry. What are people looking for? What are companies trying to do? Where are they going with this kind of stuff? And the important thing to realize here is that the telecom industry is evolving. It's not static, all right? And it's often evolves in ways that are going to be very difficult to predict, all right? As a master's student, you want to be ready for what comes next, and you don't know what that is. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell, So what makes the most sense is, yes, you want to focus on whatever area you want to focus on, but you don't want to be exclusive about it and ignore the rest of the telecom industry. So, what are the common areas that you should look into, and what are the things that you should do to prepare yourself to enter the telecom industry? Well, as a telecom professional, you're going to need to be familiar with all the aspects of the industry, at least at some level, all right? And it's important to understand you need to be cognizant of both the theoretical aspects so that you can keep up with what comes down the pipe, and the practical aspects as well, the day-to-day work. All right. So, for example, what are the areas you can talk about? Well, the most obvious one is computer networking. It's kind of hard to have a telecom network without a network. So, what do we, this is sort of fundamental. Similarly, wireless communications, who hasn't, heard the term 5G in the last 24 hours? Everybody talking about it. And soon, 6G will be coming down the pipe. All right. And then, even if you're focused on, networking and wireless, in the background, there's always some computer programming. People talk about computing and programming a lot. And in the last couple of years, the advent of, AIs has brought it a little more to the forefront. So that is certainly going to be one of the central areas that you want to look into. And then finally, there's something you usually don't think about as a technical person, but there's business. Remember, telecom companies are in the business of making money. That's what they do. All right. And if you're not cognizant of it, it's not a game. It's not, we're not inventing all this great technology just for kicks, yucks, and chuckles. We're trying to make a profit here. So it's important to understand the business aspects of what's going on. Once you've got the basis down, you've got a good basis in all of these subject areas, you understand the fundamentals, then you can start building on it and take more advanced classes and grow a focus in the direction that you want to study. So, in each of these areas, what can we say? Well, let's look at computer networking first. On the theoretical side, you've got subjects like software-defined networks, virtual machines, network optimization. There's lots of great topics here. And, you're going to be thinking about, high order ideas and the architecture of hypervisors and this kind of things. But it's important also to be familiar with the practical aspects of these telecom, you know, uh, the the way computer networks are put together. In particular, actually working with routers, hardware programming. I ran into a student one time, who was actually an advanced student, and the man had never actually touched a router. And he was kind of amazed because we had a lab there, and he was, oh, that's what it looks like. I'm like, and you're writing, highfalutin papers on this stuff. I am It's kind of scary. I'd be very concerned about having somebody like this joining my company if I was in industry. What's he going to do? I don't know. Anyway, and that's just an example. So it's important to have both aspects. Similarly, on wireless side, you have the same kind of dichotomy. On the theory, well, you're talking about the standards, and the technologies, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, TDMA, CDMA, OFDMA, 5G new radio, whatever they're talking about. They haven't even come up with a name for the version of what's going to come down the line in 6G. But, these tend to be more theoretical ideas, how things are supposed to work and so forth. But it's important to realize that, yeah, it's good to understand this stuff, but it's also important that, if you look at a RF engineer working at AT&T, he's not sitting here thinking about, the theory and the theory of how these technologies are going to interplay with each other very often. That's not what he's doing. His job is to make sure that this network he's deploying works. Do I have coverage for people? Do I have enough capacity? What are the throughputs? What's going on? Troubleshooting problems, day-to-day stuff like that. And in order to understand, to be able to do that kind of job, you need to have at your disposal some industry standard tools. All right. You need to be able to use things like, IB Wave, RAN plan, Y-Spy, tools like that industry professionals use to work real day-to-day problems. And hardware programming. It's one thing to say, I understand, the theory of how an OFDM signal is created. It's another thing to say, well, I've actually used a programmable radio and I built one, and it did this, and I studied this. That's a lot more impactful if you're talking about it during an interview, for example. All right. And you notice one of the threads that's running through here, hardware programming, radio programming is programming. All right. There's an underlying thread of computer science that's carrying through this discussion. And that is a key focus as well. At the basic level, you need to be able to program. All right. Most people in telecom, as undergraduates, they probably took C, C++, something like that is very common. These days, the most common programming language people are using is Python. But you need some background in programming, and you need it or scripting at least, so that you can solve day-to-day engineering problems. All right. And if programming is your bag, and if that's where you want to focus, well, you can go deeper into this. Cloud computing, sort of an intersection of networking and programming. Data mining. You're given all this data. How do you get information out of it? People always say we live in the information age, and that's not really true. We'd like to live in the information age. What we live in is the data age. We have tons of data. How do you distill a nugget of information out of that? And one of the key mechanisms that people are talking about to do a lot of this information processing to get to get information is, machine learning and, AI concepts. And in recent years, this has become very popular, and it's likely to become a thread that continues again to wrap through the other areas of telecom. I can see where 5 and 6G, advanced 5G and 6G applications are going to end up making use of AI concepts. So again, it's a thread. And let's not forget business. All right. At a bare raw level, everyone working in the business needs to have some awareness of marketing, of course, because the business wants to make money. Management, so that we can actually function and the things get done. And but in the background, there's economics. You want to understand the economics of the industry that's out there, and you want to have the mechanisms to be able to make intelligent business decisions with that knowledge. Okay. For example, it's great that you're think back to the beginning of the 20th century. I could be the best in the world at making buggy whips. Who wants to buy a buggy whip when the automobile comes out? And you don't want to be left holding the buggy whip, all right, or the bag, all right. So these are ideas that permeate, your will permeate your career as you go forward. And it's important to realize that these, along with financing and accounting, are what people sometimes call the 6 pillars of an MBA. You know, and even if you're not, particularly interested in being an MBA kind of person, I'm a technical guy. I want to go to technical things. That's great, but you need to understand how your technical stuff fits into the company's agenda, which is to make a profit and to be successful. So that's where the business stuff fits in. So obviously, next question is, where do I begin? All right, where do I start? Well, if you're a first-year master's student, you should usually start with classes that cover the basics. All right. For example, fundamental wireless concepts, digital communications, basics of cellular, very important stuff. All right. Fundamental networking concepts, networking, TCP/IP and all that good stuff that goes on there. And of course, to go with networking protocols so you can get the implementation done. In business, well, business is kind of, you can start wherever you feel comfortable starting. Most people will start with typically either economics or marketing or something like that, but you could also start with management and go on from there. Then by the time you get to your second year, or in some cases, second semester, you have enough background to be able to start building on it and taking advanced courses. Now, you can play some trade-offs here. You might, if you're interested in wireless, maybe you want to do all your fundamental wireless courses in the first semester, and that's okay, but you got to be careful when you do that. You don't want to end up, leaving the business saying, oh, I'll get to the business eventually, and leave it all till the end. If you do that, you're likely to end up in a bad situation where, you get to your last semester and I've got a whole semester of business courses to take. That ain't going to be fun for you. You're going to probably suffer. It's going to hurt your GPA more than likely, and that won't do anybody any good. All right. So it's a good idea to spread it out as evenly as possible. So while maybe you want to start a little more technical, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to keep things balanced all the way through. All right. But you've got to be aware of these things. And one of the key thing here is to get some good advice. Meet with your advisor and talk about this, and make sure that the track you're on makes sense. This is going to get me to the next semester and the semester after that, and I'm going to have reasonable schedules, and I'm going to graduate with having taken the courses I want. And this is something that may require you to visit your advisor once a semester or at least once a year to make sure you're on track and everything is working the way you want. All right. As an example, let me talk about my own program, the Masters in Telecom at UMD. We kind of force this issue. We require all of our students to have 2 semesters of networking and protocols, 2 semesters of wireless communications, 4 semesters of business classes, one of each of the areas I mentioned, and 2 semesters of advanced electives, so you can build in the direction you want to go. And typically, you will also write a scholarly paper on an advanced topic of your choice to get some truly in-depth knowledge across and serve as a talking point, among other things, that you can talk to an interviewer about when they ask you about your interests and what you've done. All right. Well, that's kind of the basics. Now, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about, well, telecom industry and how I should proceed? Well, one of the most common misconceptions that I've heard from students is, hey, I need to pick an area. I'm going to be a wireless engineer. I'm going to take all my courses in wireless. Those are the companies I'm going to apply to. All right. Well, that's nice from your point of view, and it might make sense if you're planning on being a PhD, getting a PhD in wireless engineering, and great if you want to go teach at the university, terrific. But if you want to work in the industry, that's not the way most companies function. All right. Companies generally don't think of themselves as wireless companies or networking companies or programming companies. They think of themselves as telecom companies. AT&T may be a big wireless company, but it maintains an enormous computer network. All right. You know, uh, and Cisco and Juniper, they're all very excited about how their equipment is going to be able to enable advanced 5G and future 6G applications. All right, this is the nature of the way this is the nature of the beast. So if you're all entirely focused on one area, that's a little bit myopic, and it's very dangerous. All right. What happens if, it turns out that particular area you studied wireless, and turns out when you graduate, one of the large wireless companies had some kind of bad quarter, and lost money and laid people off? Well, it's going to be very hard to find a job. If you have a more balanced background, you know, you can apply to not just wireless companies. You can apply to networking companies. You can apply to Google. Hey, I can program. I understand some of this stuff, and I understand networking, and I understand cloud. There's a lot of possibilities here. All right. Another misconception that I've heard from several students is, look, I'm a technical guy. I'm an engineer. I want to be technical. I don't need business. I shouldn't bother with business. Again, this is very short-sighted. Why? In reality, 5 years from now, or let's say 5 years from when you graduate, you're going to be working at a company. You will have gotten raises over the last 5 years, and they're probably happy with your performance. They haven't fired you. You're doing okay. But at some point, someone's going to ask the question, what do you bring to the table to justify this advanced salary that you're getting? If all it is technical skill, remember, your technical skills are now 5 years old. People graduating that year, well, they not only know 5G, they know about 6G. They've heard about 7G. They've got better skills than you, more advanced skills. They knew you knew how to use version 6 of some software. They're using version 8. Now what? Well, you're kind of on the hot seat. How do you justify your salary? How do you justify the fact that you should be paid more than these new people? Well, the only way to do that is to progress in your career. And to do that, well, what do you need to be able to do? Well, number one, I need to be able to lead a team. All right. I'm not just a technical person. I can get a group of technical people to solve a big problem. This is a very marketable skill. It's a business skill. It's management in a sense. I can address a customer's needs. All right. I can interact with the customer, and I can get them to fork over money for a technical solution. You know, this is how you get promoted to, a lead, a group lead, or an associate director of a company or something like that. All right. On the and an important point I want to make here is this is even true if you talk about people who are ostensibly on a technical track. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to become a lead engineer and I'm going to become a principal engineer. I don't want to be in the management side of things." Well, newsflash, you're going to be whether you want to or not. What is a lead engineer? A lead engineer is an engineer who can manage himself. He can talk to the customer and give the customer a solution. What is a principal engineer? A principal engineer is a guy who can organize a group of technical staff and get them to solve a complex, high order problem. Yes, it's a technical job, but what's he going to do? He's going to talk to the customer about that. He's working at a different level, he's working at a higher level, but he's essentially, and he for sure is doing technical work. I mean, he's got to make sure all these people are working in concert and all the parts work together, but it's also a business skill. All right. And the most successful people that I know who do this, principal engineers and corporate engineers who did this kind of stuff, keep their feet in both worlds. It's a lot of work to keep the technical expertise up and to keep, reading papers and keep your knowledge base sharp. But they have to do it if they want to be able to be a technical lead. It's a challenging task. But that's not the only task. It's not important not to neglect the business side of that task. All right, more misconceptions. What I like isn't important. Today, everyone's talking about 5G. I want to go work in 5G. Everybody's talking about AI. I want to go work in AI. What's popular industry is what matters, not what I want. That's not at all true. All right. In reality, well, okay, I shouldn't say it's not at all true. It certainly is true if if the thing that you like is 19th century French poetry. Great, you're right. That's useful in terms of getting a job in telecom. It's probably not terribly useful to get a job most other places either. And you can have a fulfilling life, and that's great. But in the telecom fields, however, that's almost anything you want to do is going to be marketable. And what you like is what will distinguish you from your peers. So, for example, I have a former student. He wanted to study satellites. And satellites is great. And this is before Starlink launched. This was like 5 years ago. And he was excited about satellites. And I said, fine, go pursue the satellites. And what ended up happening is, he graduated, he got a job at a little satellite company, and now 5 years later, it's very exciting. He's sitting here working on providing mobile satellite solutions and getting providing satellite communications to mobiles in isolated and remote areas. So it's important that it's important to realize that your technical area that you want to study, it's probably somebody that's interested in it. All right. And this is again where some advising will help. All right. And it's also important to realize that you'll be excited about talking about this stuff. You're in an interview and the guy sees you wrote your paper on satellites and asks you a question. And you get all animated and you're talking about all this great stuff that you wrote about in your paper and you're animated. And remember, that's important. He's going to look at that and he's going to be thinking to himself, this person is excited about something, and that's good, And that plays into this next misconception I want to talk about. If I want to get an internship or a co-op, I need to take all my technical courses early and be a very technical guy. In reality, most large companies are not so much interested in your background. Of course they like to see that you've done certain technical things and it's always good, but that's not what you're really looking for in an interview. All right, they want to know how you're going to interact with the other members of your team. You're going to be put on the team to do something. How are you going to work with them? Are you somebody that can get along, or are you going to be a detriment. Of course, you have to know the basics, and they're probably not going to hire you if you don't know anything. But beyond that, they're much more interested in what you can learn, how you interact when you're confronted with something you don't know how to solve, and how you work with that. That's what tells them how they can, hey, this person's going to be a good employee, because as things evolve, they can keep up. And in a sense, the interview is much more important than whatever your courses are and even whatever your grades are. I've seen students with truly mediocre GPAs get jobs ahead of people that are all stars because they can communicate well and they can handle an interview well. And again, this is a topic for another discussion. Later, I will have a talk on interview tactics. But for now, this is enough to get you started and thinking about what to do when you graduate. So I want to thank you for your attention. Again, I'm with the Masters in Telecommunications program at the University of Maryland. Come check us out, telecom.umd.edu. And you can email the program office if you have more questions. And thank you.